There's a moment in every person's life when they look around and realize they're stuck in the same place they were 5 years ago, doing the same things, having the same conversations, getting the same results. And that moment, painful as it is, might be the most valuable wake-up call you'll ever receive. You know, I've spent decades studying success, watching people transform their lives, and I'll tell you something that might surprise you. The people who make it aren't necessarily smarter than those who don't. They're not always more talented or better connected. What separates them is something far more fundamental. They understand how growth actually works. They've learned to read the signs, to trust the process, even when everything in them wants to quit, and most importantly, they've made peace with the fact that progress rarely looks the way we think it should. Let me tell you what I mean. When most people start something new, whether it's a business, a fitness program, or learning a skill, they carry this picture in their mind. They see themselves putting in effort and getting results in a nice, steady upward line. Day 1, they're here. Day 30, they're a little higher. Day 90, higher still. Smooth, predictable, logical. But here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. That's not how anything works. That's not how plants grow. That's not how businesses develop. And that's certainly not how human beings transform. Real growth follows a curve. And if you don't understand this curve, you're going to misinterpret everything that happens to you. You're going to think you're failing when you're actually succeeding. You're going to quit right before the breakthrough. You're going to look at your life and wonder why you can't seem to get ahead, when the reality is you were doing everything right, you just didn't give it enough time. I learned this lesson the hard way. When I was starting out, I had all the enthusiasm in the world, but none of the understanding. I'd work hard for a few weeks, maybe a month, and when I didn't see the results I expected, I'd get discouraged. I'd start questioning everything. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should try something else. And you know what I did? I'd switch directions. Start something new. Feel that initial burst of excitement again. And then, predictably, hit the same wall a few weeks later. It took me years to realize I wasn't failing at different things. I was failing at the same thing over and over again. I was failing to understand that the early stage of anything worthwhile feels exactly like failure. It feels like you're spinning your wheels. It feels like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck. It feels like maybe you made a mistake, like you're wasting your time, like you should cut your losses and move on. Here's what I want you to understand. When you plant a seed in the ground, something remarkable happens beneath the surface long before you see anything above it. That seed is breaking open. Roots are forming, pushing down into the soil, creating a foundation. Energy is being gathered. A complex system is being built. But if you were to dig it up after a week because you don't see a plant yet, you'd destroy all that hidden work. You'd kill the very thing that was about to emerge. The same principle applies to everything meaningful in life. There's always a period where your effort seems disproportionate to your results. You're putting in 10 units of energy and getting back 1 unit of visible progress. And this is where most people make the fatal mistake. They judge their actions by immediate results rather than trusting the process. Think about someone learning to play an instrument. The first few months are brutal. Their fingers hurt, the sounds they produce are terrible, practice feels like punishment. They can practice for an hour and still sound worse than someone who's been playing for years sounds in the first 30 seconds. If they measure success by how good they sound right now compared to where they want to be, they'll quit. But if they understand the curve, they know this struggle is temporary. They know that what feels like slow progress is actually building muscle memory, training their ear, creating neural pathways. All that effort is going somewhere, even when it doesn't feel like it. I see this in business all the time. Someone starts a company, works 80-hour weeks, pours their heart and soul into it. 6 months in, they're barely scraping by. The money coming in doesn't justify the effort going out, and they start thinking they've made a terrible mistake. But what they don't see is all the infrastructure they're building, the relationships they're forming, the lessons they're learning, the reputation they're establishing, the systems they're creating. All of that is root system. All of that matters. But none of it shows up on this month's financial statement. Here's the thing about the early stage of growth. It's designed to filter people out. It's designed to test your commitment. Because if success came easy and fast, everyone would do it, and it wouldn't be worth much. The difficulty is part of what creates the value. The struggle is what builds the character you'll need to handle the success when it comes. You know what happens to most people? They put in 6 months of effort, see minimal results, and quit. Then someone else comes along, does the same thing for 6 months, and suddenly things start clicking. They look like an overnight success. But they're not. They're standing on the foundation that takes time to build. They just had the wisdom or the stubbornness to keep going when nothing seemed to be working. Let me share something with you. There was a time in my life when I was doing everything I knew to do. I was reading books, attending seminars, applying what I learned. I was working harder than I'd ever worked. And for the longest time, nothing changed. My bank account looked the same. My circumstances looked the same. I'd look in the mirror and think, when is this going to pay off? When am I going to see something different? But here's what I didn't realize then that I understand now: I was changing. Every book was adding to my philosophy. Every seminar was adjusting my perspective. Every failure was teaching me what not to do. Every conversation was expanding my network. I was becoming a different person, developing a different mindset, building different skills. And all of that was preparing me for opportunities I couldn't even see yet. Then one day something shifted, not because that day was special, but because I'd finally accumulated enough knowledge, enough skill, enough relationships, enough credibility. The curve bent upward. Things that had been hard became easier. Opportunities that had been closed became available. Results that had been slow suddenly accelerated. And people who hadn't seen all those years of preparation started calling it luck. This is what you need to understand: the curve has different phases. And each phase requires something different from you. The beginning requires faith. You have to believe in what you're doing when you have no evidence it's working. You have to trust that your efforts matter, even when you can't see the payoff. This is where your philosophy becomes everything. This is where your reasons for starting have to be strong enough to outlast your doubts. I remember working with someone years ago who was trying to build something meaningful. Every week he'd come to me discouraged. "Nothing's happening," he'd say. "I'm doing everything right, but I'm not seeing results." And I'd tell him, "Keep going. Trust the process." But I could see the doubt growing in his eyes. Finally, one day he quit, said it wasn't working. And you know what happened? 3 months later, someone else in the same industry who'd been putting in the same kind of effort started seeing breakthrough results. Was it because they were better? No. It was because they stayed on the curve long enough to reach the bend. The middle phase of the curve is different. This is where initial excitement has worn off, but major results haven't shown up yet. This is the phase that tests your discipline, because now you're not running on enthusiasm anymore. You're running on commitment. You're doing the work because you said you would, not because you feel like it. You're maintaining consistency even when it's boring, even when it feels pointless, even when nobody's watching. This is where the principle of compound effect becomes your best friend or your worst enemy. Every day you're either adding to your foundation or subtracting from it. Every choice either moves you forward or sets you back. And the tricky thing about this phase is that no single choice seems to matter that much. Missing one workout doesn't destroy your fitness. Skipping one day of practice doesn't ruin your skill. Neglecting one business task doesn't kill your company. But the accumulation of those choices over weeks and months, that determines everything. You see, success isn't about making one great decision. It's about making decent decisions consistently over time. It's about showing up when you don't feel like it. It's about doing the work that doesn't feel productive. It's about maintaining standards when no one would know if you cut corners. This is where character is built. This is where the person you're becoming is more important than the results you're getting. Here's something fascinating about the middle phase. This is often where people are making the most progress but feeling the least encouraged. They've gotten past the awkward beginner stage. They're competent now, but they're not yet excellent. They're doing good work but not getting the recognition. They're making progress but not the kind that turns heads. And this creates a dangerous psychological trap because they start thinking, if I'm working this hard and only getting these results, maybe this is as good as it gets. But that's not how the curve works. The middle phase is where you're building momentum. Think about pushing a car. At first, it takes enormous effort just to get it moving. You're straining, you're sweating, and the car's barely budging. But once it starts rolling, each push moves it a little faster. And eventually you reach a point where your effort is the same, but the car's moving significantly faster. That's momentum. That's the curve beginning to bend in your favor. I'll tell you something else about this middle phase that most people never consider. This is where your daily habits become your destiny. What you do repeatedly during this time is literally creating your future. You're not just working toward a goal. You're becoming a type of person. And the type of person you become will determine not just whether you reach your goals, but what you do once you get there. Think about it like this. Two people start businesses at the same time. They both work hard through the beginning phase. But in the middle phase, one person develops the habit of cutting corners when they're tired. The other develops the habit of maintaining standards regardless of how they feel. One person develops the habit of blaming circumstances when things don't go well. The other develops the habit of taking responsibility and finding solutions. One person develops the habit of doing just enough to get by. The other develops the habit of giving their best, even when no one's watching. Now, both of these people might reach a certain level of success. But the habits they developed in the middle phase will determine what kind of success they have and whether they can sustain it. The one who cut corners will struggle with quality issues. The one who blamed circumstances will struggle with problem solving. The one who did just enough will plateau quickly. But the one who maintained high standards, took responsibility and gave their best, they'll have a foundation that can support continuous growth. This is why the middle phase is so critical. It's not just about getting through it. It's about who you become while you're going through it. It's about the standards you maintain when it would be easier to lower them. It's about the integrity you keep when no one would know if you compromised. It's about the excellence you pursue when mediocrity would go unnoticed. And here's something else that happens in this middle phase that you need to understand. This is where you start to see who's really committed and who's just interested. Interest will get you started, but only commitment will get you through. Interested people do what's convenient. Committed people do what's necessary. Interested people stop when it gets hard. Committed people push harder when it gets hard. Interested people look for reasons to quit. Committed people look for reasons to continue. The world is full of interested people. They're interested in being healthy, interested in being successful, interested in being happy. But interest doesn't build anything. Interest doesn't create results. Interest is just a feeling that comes and goes based on circumstances. Commitment is different. Commitment is a decision you make once and then honor every day regardless of how you feel. Commitment says, I'm doing this. Whether it's easy or hard, whether I feel like it or not, whether I see results today or not. The breakthrough point is where everything changes. This is where accumulated effort suddenly becomes visible results, where years of preparation meet opportunity, where all those small improvements compound into something significant. And here's what's interesting: when you reach this point, it can feel like things are happening overnight, like you suddenly got lucky, like everything just fell into place. But that's an illusion. The breakthrough isn't the beginning of your success. It's the evidence of all the work that came before it. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. Someone works in obscurity for years, developing their craft, and then suddenly they're everywhere. Everyone's talking about them, opportunities are flowing, success seems effortless, and people who don't understand the curve think they just caught a break. But if you look closer, you'll see the years of preparation. You'll see the foundation that was built when nobody was watching. You'll see the price that was paid in the phases before the breakthrough. Now here's something most people don't consider: the curve doesn't end at the breakthrough. That's not the finish line, that's just the first major milestone. Because once you reach a certain level of success, a whole new curve begins. New challenges emerge. New skills are required. New growth becomes necessary. And this is where many people plateau because they think they've arrived. They think they can coast on what got them here. But life doesn't work that way. The moment you stop growing, you start declining. Not because you're going backward, but because everything around you is moving forward. The market evolves. The competition improves. Standards rise. What was excellent yesterday becomes average today. So the question isn't whether you'll face new curves, it's whether you'll embrace them or resist them. Think about someone who reaches financial success. They've built wealth, they're comfortable, and suddenly the hunger that drove them starts to fade. They stop reading books because they think they know enough. They stop pushing themselves because they've already proven what they can do. They stop learning because they're busy maintaining what they have. And slowly, often without realizing it, they stop growing. They become a smaller version of themselves with a bigger bank account. The truth is, growth isn't a destination, it's a lifestyle. It's something you commit to, not because you have to, but because you want to. Because you understand that the purpose of life isn't to arrive somewhere and stop, it's to continue becoming more than you were. To keep expanding your capacity, to keep challenging yourself, to keep discovering what you're capable of. I learned this from watching people over the years. The ones who stayed vibrant, who kept making contributions, who continued to matter, they were the ones who stayed curious. They were the ones who treated every stage of life as an opportunity to learn something new. They didn't retire from growth when they retired from work. They didn't coast when they could have. They understood that the moment you think you've learned enough is the moment you stop being interesting. Here's another truth about the curve that most people miss. It's not just about external achievements. The most important growth happens internally. Who you become matters more than what you acquire. The character you develop, the wisdom you gain, the perspective you build, these are the real prizes. These are what allow you to handle success without it destroying you. These are what give your life meaning beyond the metrics. I've seen people achieve everything they thought they wanted and still feel empty, because they focused on the results without developing themselves. They climbed the curve of external success while neglecting the curve of internal growth. They got the money, the recognition, the status, but they didn't become the kind of person who could truly enjoy those things or use them well. And then I've seen people who didn't achieve spectacular external results but lived rich, meaningful lives. Because they focused on becoming. They worked on their character. They developed their philosophy. They invested in relationships. They pursued wisdom. They were on a different kind of curve. One that doesn't show up on a resume, but makes all the difference in how life feels. Let me tell you what I think the real secret is: understanding that multiple curves are running simultaneously in your life. There's the curve of your career, the curve of your relationships, the curve of your health, the curve of your personal development. And wisdom is learning to give attention to all of them, not just the one that seems most urgent or most rewarding right now. Because here's what happens: people will sacrifice their health for their career, thinking they'll take care of it later. They'll neglect their relationships for their ambitions, assuming the people they love will always be there. They'll ignore their personal growth for immediate results, not realizing they're building a shaky foundation. And then one day they wake up successful in one area but bankrupt in others. They're at the top of one curve but at the bottom of several others. The art of living well is learning to progress on multiple curves at once. It's about understanding that working on yourself isn't time away from working on your goals. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. It's about recognizing that taking care of your relationships isn't a distraction from success. It's what makes success meaningful. It's about knowing that maintaining your health isn't optional. It's what allows you to enjoy what you've built. You know what I've noticed? The people who understand the curve have a different relationship with time. They're patient with the process but urgent about daily execution. They know that transformation takes time, but that time alone doesn't create transformation. What creates transformation is what you do with the time. It's the daily decisions, the consistent actions, the accumulated wisdom. They don't get discouraged by slow progress because they understand that slow progress compounds into remarkable results. They don't get impatient because they trust that if they keep doing the right things, the curve will eventually bend in their favor. And when it does, they don't get complacent because they know another curve is waiting. Here's what else I've learned about time and the curve. Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. They want everything now, and when it doesn't come now, they give up on ever having it. But the person who understands the curve thinks differently. They know that significant transformation doesn't happen in days or weeks. It happens in years. And they're willing to invest those years because they understand that time is going to pass anyway. 5 years from now, you're going to be 5 years older, whether you work on yourself or not, whether you pursue your goals or not, whether you stay committed to growth or not. The only question is, what you'll have to show for those 5 years. Will you be in the same place you are now, having the same conversations, facing the same problems? Or will you have transformed into someone new, someone more capable, someone living a completely different life? The curve doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care if you're scared or uncertain or uncomfortable. It operates according to principles that are as reliable as gravity. You plant seeds, they grow. You do the work, you get results. You stay consistent, you build momentum. You quit early, you start over. The curve is impartial. It rewards everyone who respects it and ignores everyone who doesn't. And here's what makes the curve so beautiful and so frustrating at the same time: it can't be negotiated with. You can't convince it to speed up. You can't sweet talk it into giving you results before you've done the work. You can't shortcut it or hack it or find some clever way around it. The only way through is through. The only way to the other side is to walk the path, step by step, day by day, until you get there. But here's the thing most people don't appreciate about this reality. The fact that you can't shortcut the curve is actually a gift. Because it means that anyone who's willing to do the work can get results. It doesn't matter where you started, it doesn't matter what advantages or disadvantages you have. The curve doesn't discriminate, it doesn't play favorites. It simply responds to consistent effort applied over time. Think about what that means. It means you don't need to be gifted. You don't need to be lucky. You don't need to know the right people or have the right connections. You just need to be willing to start and keep going. You need to be willing to put in the work when it doesn't feel like it's working. You need to be willing to trust the process when you have no proof the process is trustworthy. You need to be willing to believe in yourself when nobody else does. That's the entry price. That's what the curve demands. And yes, it's a high price. But it's a fair price. Because what you're buying with that price isn't just external success. You're buying the internal transformation that makes you worthy of that success. You're buying the character that can sustain it. You're buying the wisdom that knows what to do with it. Here's something I want you to really hear wherever you are right now on your curve. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. If you're in the difficult beginning phase where nothing seems to be working, you're not behind. You're in the necessary stage of building foundation. If you're in the middle phase where you're consistent but not seeing breakthrough results yet, you're not stuck. You're in the momentum building stage. If you've reached a breakthrough and things are flowing, you're not done. You're being given an opportunity to make the most of this phase while preparing for the next curve. The question isn't what phase you're in, it's what you're going to do with the phase you're in. Are you going to quit in the beginning because it's hard? Are you going to coast in the middle because it's boring? Are you going to plateau at the breakthrough because it's comfortable? Or are you going to honor each phase for what it is and extract everything it has to teach you? Let me tell you what happens when you really embrace this understanding. You stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. You stop feeling like a failure because you're not where you want to be yet. You stop looking for shortcuts because you realize the process itself is valuable. You stop resenting the struggle because you understand it's building something in you that you'll need later. You develop patience without becoming passive. You develop persistence without becoming stubborn. You develop faith in the process without becoming naive. You learn to read the signs of genuine progress even when the world doesn't see it yet. You learn to trust your growth even when your bank account doesn't reflect it yet. You learn to believe in what you're building even when others don't understand it yet. And here's the beautiful thing: once you understand the curve, you can't unsee it. You'll recognize it everywhere. You'll see it in nature, in business, in relationships, in personal development. You'll see other people going through the phases you went through, and instead of judging them, you'll understand what they're experiencing. You'll be able to encourage someone in the beginning phase because you remember what that felt like. You'll be able to warn someone approaching a plateau because you know how easy it is to get comfortable. This understanding becomes one of your greatest assets. It's the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is understanding the concepts. Wisdom is having lived through them and integrated the lessons. And when you combine wisdom about the curve with commitment to your growth, you become almost unstoppable. Not because you never struggle, but because you know how to interpret the struggle. Not because you never doubt, but because you know the doubts are part of the process. Think about water boiling. You put a pot of water on the stove and turn on the heat. Nothing happens for a while. The water just sits there. You keep the heat on. Still nothing. More time passes. Still no change. Then suddenly, bubbles start forming. And within moments, the whole pot is boiling. Did the water go from cold to boiling in those final moments? Of course not. Every minute the heat was on. The temperature was rising. You just couldn't see it until it reached the critical point. Your life works the same way. Every day you invest in yourself. Every day you do the work. Every day you maintain your standards. The temperature is rising. You're getting closer to your boiling point, your breakthrough moment. But if you turn off the heat because you don't see bubbles yet, you'll never reach it. You'll abandon the process right before the transformation. So what does this mean for how you live your life going forward? It means you make peace with the early struggle. You expect it, you prepare for it, you push through it. It means you commit to the middle phase even when it's unglamorous. You stay consistent even when it's boring. You maintain your standards even when no one's watching. It means you prepare for the breakthrough by becoming the kind of person who can handle it. You work on your character so success doesn't corrupt you. You develop your philosophy so achievement doesn't empty you. And most importantly, it means you stay humble and hungry throughout every phase. Humble enough to know you're always a student. hungry enough to keep reaching for more growth. The day you think you've mastered life is the day you stop truly living it. The day you think you've learned enough is the day you become irrelevant. The day you stop growing is the day you start dying. I've lived long enough to know this. The curve is always teaching you something if you're willing to learn. The beginning teaches you faith and commitment. The middle teaches you discipline and patience. The breakthrough teaches you gratitude and stewardship. And the plateaus teach you humility and the need for renewal. Every phase has gifts if you're wise enough to receive them. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to start. Stop expecting immediate results. Stop comparing your progress to anyone else's. Stop judging yourself harshly for being in the difficult phase. And start trusting the process. Start honoring the work even when it doesn't feel productive. Start believing in your growth even when you can't measure it yet. Start understanding that everything worthwhile takes time and that time well spent always pays dividends. The curve is real. It's predictable. It's reliable. And once you align yourself with how it works instead of fighting it, your entire life changes. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start feeling like a student of life. You stop asking why things are so hard and start asking what you can learn from the difficulty. You stop looking for shortcuts and start appreciating the journey. And somewhere along the way, something remarkable happens. You look back at where you started and you barely recognize that person. You realize how much you've grown, how much you've learned, how much more capable you've become. And you understand that the struggle wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The difficulty wasn't a mistake. It was a necessary part of becoming who you needed to be. That's what understanding the curve gives you. Not a guarantee of success, but a framework for growth. Not a promise that it will be easy, but an assurance that it will be worth it. Not a shortcut around the difficult parts, but a map that helps you navigate them. And in the end, that's all any of us really need, not to avoid the journey, but to understand it well enough to complete it.